In the spring of 2021, a research team lowered an unmanned deep-water drone into Lake Baikal in southern Siberia and sent it straight down, past the light, past the point where any human diver could survive, toward a bottom that sits more than a mile beneath the surface. The drone carried floodlights and high-definition cameras, and for nearly an hour it descended through water so cold and so clear that the crew on the boat could watch the readout tick down through depths no camera had ever filmed. And then, just above the floor of the deepest lake on Earth, the lights caught movement. Something rose out of the black, pale and enormous, and for a few frames it filled the entire screen before the feed cut to static. What the operators saw in those frames, according to the people who were on that boat, did not match anything that is supposed to live in Lake Baikal. It was long, and it was pale, almost silver, and it moved through the water with an unmistakable, deliberate, upright shape. It had what looked like limbs. It had what looked like a head that turned toward the light. And when the drone was hauled back to the surface, a portion of the recorded footage was missing, the deepest minutes simply gone, and the expedition's lead scientist reportedly refused to discuss what the cameras had captured with anyone outside the team. That footage has never been released. But it was not the first time something impossible was reported from the bottom of this lake. And once you understand what has been seen in Baikal over the last 50 years, the missing minutes stop looking like an accident. Because what is at the bottom of Lake Baikal defies almost everything we think we know. It defies what we understand about how deep and how old a lake can be. It defies the physics of ice, with perfect black circles that appear on the frozen surface each winter and can be seen from orbit. It defies the official record, with dead bodies that go into the water and are never given back. And it defies the entire boundary between legend and reality, with an incident buried in Soviet military history, in which Navy divers reportedly encountered a group of massive, silver, humanoid figures nearly 50 meters down and did not all come back alive. Perfect geometric rings carved into meter-thick ice by something moving beneath it. Flashes of light rising from a floor no sunlight has ever touched. A lake so cold and so hungry that it strips the drowned to bone and keeps them. And a race of upright human-shaped swimmers that Soviet divers swore they saw with their own eyes, that the military swore never existed, and that a drone may have finally filmed in 2021. This is the story of what is really at the bottom of Lake Baikal. And by the end of it, you will understand why that missing footage was never released, why 3 Soviet divers reportedly died trying to bring one of these things to the surface, and why the survivors of that dive were allegedly ordered never to speak of what they saw for the rest of their lives. To understand how any of this could be real, you have to start with the lake itself, because there is no other body of water like it anywhere on the planet. Most people, when they hear the word lake, picture something you can see across, something you could swim the width of, something with a bottom a diver could reach. Baikal is not that. Baikal is a crack in the crust of the Earth, a rift where the continent is slowly pulling itself apart, and it holds numbers that do not sound like they belong to a lake at all. It is the deepest lake in the world. Its floor lies more than 5,300 feet down, over a mile of black water stacked above the deepest point, and the rift beneath the sediment goes deeper still. It is the oldest lake in the world, somewhere around 25 million years old, ancient beyond the scale of almost anything else on the surface of the planet. Old enough that evolution has had time to do strange and private things in its depths. And it is the largest freshwater lake in the world by volume. Not by surface area, but by sheer quantity of water. Baikal alone holds around 20% of all the unfrozen fresh water on Earth. One lake, in one valley in Siberia, holds a fifth of the planet's liquid fresh water. That combination, extreme depth, extreme age, extreme isolation, has turned Baikal into something closer to an inland sea or an alien ocean than an ordinary lake. Roughly 80% of the animal species that live in it exist nowhere else on Earth. It has its own species of freshwater seal, the nirpa, a creature that somehow found its way to a lake in the dead center of a continent, hundreds of miles from any ocean, and no one is entirely certain how. It has transparent fish that dissolve in the sun, It has swarms of amphipods, tiny crustacean scavengers, that carpet the lakebed in numbers beyond counting. Baikal is not a body of water that life merely tolerates. It is a closed world that has been evolving its own rules for 25 million years, in the dark, away from us. And it is cold. Even in the height of summer, a few hundred feet down, the water sits at just a few degrees above freezing, and it stays that way, unchanging, all the way to the bottom. The lake is also astonishingly clear enough in winter that you can see over 100 feet down through the ice, which means that light and whatever is watching from below can travel a very long way. But past a certain depth, no light reaches at all. The bottom of Baikal is a place of total darkness, crushing pressure, and near freezing cold that has never once, in 25 million years, been visited by the sun. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of the floor of this lake. Only a handful of crude submersible dives have ever reached the deepest parts, and they came back with more questions than answers. This is the perfect place for something to exist unseen, something old, something that has never needed us to know it was there. And the first hint that Baikal was keeping secrets did not come from the bottom at all. It came from the one part of the lake we can see from space. Every winter, Lake Baikal freezes solid. The ice can grow more than a meter thick enough to drive a truck across, thick enough that roads are marked out on its surface, and cars cross the lake as if it were land. For most of the year, the frozen surface is simply that, a vast white plain in the Siberian cold. But some winters, something appears on it that should not be possible. Dark, perfect circles. Enormous rings of thinned, discolored ice, some of them more than 5 miles across, appearing on the frozen surface as if something had traced them with a compass the size of a city. They are so large and so precise that they cannot be seen from the ground at all. From the surface of the ice, standing inside one, you would never know it was there. They can only be seen from far above, from aircraft, and most famously, from orbit. It was astronauts aboard the International Space Station who first photographed them clearly, staring down at the frozen lake and seeing these flawless dark rings inscribed on the ice, geometric and deliberate, appearing in different places in different years, with no obvious cause on the surface at all. For years, they genuinely baffled everyone. The rings were too perfect to be random cracking, too large to be anything a person had made, and they appeared in the middle of a frozen wilderness where nothing should have been disturbing the ice. They fed every theory imaginable, from secret weapons tests to gas eruptions to, inevitably, something moving beneath the surface. And the honest truth is that for a long time, no one had a good answer. The answer, when it finally came, was in some ways stranger than the mystery. Researchers analyzing satellite imagery alongside sensors dropped into the water, discovered that the rings are drawn from below. Beneath the ice, warm eddies of water, great slow-spinning currents rotating in a clockwise direction, rise up against the frozen ceiling. Where the warm water circulates, at the outer edge of the eddy, it thins the ice from underneath, carving a ring of weakness meters thick and miles wide that reveals itself as that dark circle on the surface. The center stays frozen and solid. The edge is quietly eaten away from below. It is a real, physical, measurable phenomenon, and it is genuinely beautiful once you understand it. But sit with what it actually means. It means that a mile-deep lake, sealed under a meter of ice in the dead of a Siberian winter, is not still. Down in the dark, the water is moving, turning, generating warm, slow spirals powerful enough to inscribe perfect geometry into solid ice from below, patterns so large that human beings could not even perceive them until we left the planet and looked back down. The rings are proof that Baikal is doing things beneath its frozen surface that we cannot see, on a scale we cannot match, driven by forces we only recently began to understand. The lake was writing on its own ceiling, and it took us decades just to realize it was writing at all. And if the lake could hide something as vast as those rings in plain sight for so long, the obvious question becomes what else it is hiding in the places we genuinely cannot see, the places under the ice, the places at the bottom, the places where the things that go into Baikal are never seen again. There is an old saying among the people who live along the shores of Lake Baikal. They say the lake does not give up its dead. It is the kind of grim folk wisdom you find near any large and dangerous body of water, the sort of thing you assume is superstition. Except that in Baikal's case, it is almost literally true. and the reason for it is one of the eeriest facts about the entire lake. Baikal drowns people. It is a working lake, crossed by ferries and fishing boats, and in winter, by cars driving across the ice. And every year it takes lives. Storms rise on it with terrifying speed, capable of swamping a boat in minutes. In winter, the ice that seems so solid opens into cracks and pressure ridges without warning, and vehicles vanish through them into water just above freezing. People fall in, boats go down, and a startling number of the bodies are simply never recovered. They go into the water, and the water keeps them. Part of the reason is the cold and the depth. A body that sinks into a mile of near-freezing water, under crushing pressure, in total darkness, is effectively gone. There is no recovering it. But there is a second reason, and it is the one that makes people who study the lake lower their voices. Baikal's floor is carpeted with amphipods, those countless tiny scavenging crustaceans, and they are extraordinarily efficient. When something dies and reaches the bottom of Baikal, the amphipods find it, and they strip it, fast. Researchers who lower baited traps or leave specimens on the lake bed have described pulling them back up picked clean to the bone in a matter of hours. A body that reaches the deep floor of Baikal does not decompose slowly over months. It is consumed, methodically, by a living carpet of scavengers that have been performing this exact function for millions of years. The lake does not just hide its dead, it erases them. Which means the true number of people at the bottom of Lake Baikal is unknowable. Centuries of drownings, of shipwrecks, of winter crossings gone wrong, of the exiles and prisoners and soldiers that this remote corner of Siberia has swallowed across its long and brutal history. All of it has gone down into that water, and very little of it has ever come back. There are Cold War stories of aircraft that went into the lake and were never fully recovered. There are older stories still, of entire caravans lost through the winter ice. The lake bed, in the places we have managed to look, has yielded human remains where no records explain them, bones resting in the dark far from any known wreck, the last traces of people the surface world stopped counting a long time ago. And here is where the comfortable explanations start to run thin. Because among the divers and submersible crews who have gone down into Baikal, there are accounts that do not fit the picture of a quiet, cold graveyard. Accounts of remains that were not where they should be. Accounts of things on the bottom that the scavengers had, for some reason, not touched. And accounts, from the deep and the dark, of lights that should not be there at all. The bottom of Lake Baikal is one of the least accessible places on the surface of the Earth. Reaching it means descending over a mile through cold and pressure that will kill an unprotected human many times over, into darkness so complete that a submersible's floodlights carve out only a small bubble of visibility in an ocean of black. Only a handful of crewed dives have ever touched the deepest floor. And on more than one of those descents, and on sonar runs and unmanned drops across the decades, observers have reported the same disturbing thing: flashes, points and bursts of light rising from below in a place where light should not exist. They are described in different ways by different witnesses. Some talk about brief, sharp flashes, like a distant camera going off in the dark. Others describe softer, drifting glows that move against the current. Some report them on instruments, unexplained returns, and luminous smears on equipment lowered into the deepest water. What they have in common is that they come from a region of the lake where, by every rule we understand, there should be nothing to produce light at all. No sun reaches it. There is no obvious source. And so for decades, the flashes of Baikal have sat in that uncomfortable space between the explainable and the impossible. The rational explanations are real, and they matter. Baikal's floor is geologically active. It sits over a spreading rift, and along that rift, there are hydrothermal vents and seeps where gases, including methane, escape from beneath the lake bed. Methane can form pockets, and under certain conditions, gas and mineral-rich water rising from the depths can produce faint luminescence. There is also bioluminescence to consider. The possibility that some of Baikal's endemic organisms, evolved in isolation for 25 million years, generate their own light in ways we have not fully cataloged. Between escaping gas and living things that glow, much of what has been seen can, in principle, be explained. But much is not all, and popular imagination, never satisfied with methane, has seized on the flashes as something far stranger. In the retellings that circulate about Baikal, the lights become evidence of unidentified submerged objects, USOs, structured craft or beings moving through the deep water under their own power, their lights sweeping the dark floor of the oldest lake on Earth. Skeptics roll their eyes, and often they are right to. But the reason the USO stories cling to Baikal so stubbornly, the reason they will not die no matter how many times the word methane is offered, is that they did not come from nowhere. They come from something that allegedly happened to the Soviet military in this exact lake, at a depth where the darkness begins, an incident so strange that the official denial of it has done nothing but make people more certain that something was covered up. Because the flashes are only lights. Lights can be argued away. But in 1982, according to the story, Soviet Navy divers did not see a light at the bottom of Lake Baikal. They saw something looking back at them. The story goes like this, and it has been told and retold for over 40 years, in dive bases and naval circles, and eventually across the entire world, because it is the kind of story that refuses to stay buried. In 1982, the Soviet military was conducting deep-water diving exercises in Lake Baikal. This part is not in dispute. The lake's extreme depth and cold made it a natural training ground for the kind of high-pressure, low-temperature diving that had military value, and units did train there. What is disputed, fiercely and officially, is what those divers reportedly encountered at a depth of around 50 meters, in the cold twilight where the light begins to fail. According to the legend, a team of combat divers, working at that depth, became aware that they were not alone. Out of the gloom came figures, massive figures, far larger than a man, some accounts putting them at nearly 3 meters tall. They were silvery, or pale, their bodies smooth and gleaming in the divers' lights, and most disturbingly of all, they were humanoid, upright, limbed, shaped like people, but wrong in scale and wrong in every detail, moving through the deep water with an ease that no human diver in heavy gear could ever match. And they appeared to be wearing something, tight coverings or skins, with what some tellings describe as spherical helmets over their heads. They did not flee. They watched. What happened next is the heart of the legend, and the reason it has never let go of the public imagination. The order was allegedly given to attempt a capture. The divers moved to take one of the creatures using a net, and the moment they did, the creatures responded. According to the story, some kind of force, described in the retellings as a device or an unseen power, was used against the divers, and the water itself turned against them. A violent surge, a sudden and unnatural whirlpool, seized the entire team and hurled them upward, dragging them from the depths to the surface far too fast for their bodies to survive. 3 of the divers died, killed by the catastrophic ascent. The rest were left injured, some permanently, some reportedly with the lasting damage that comes from being ripped up through 50 meters of water with no time to decompress. And the survivors, the story says, were sworn to silence, ordered by their superiors never to speak of what had taken their comrades in the dark of the lake. The military has dismissed it, local dive bases have dismissed it. Officials have stated repeatedly that no such incident ever occurred, that it is a piece of folklore, a Cold War campfire story that grew in the telling. And they may be right. There is no released document, no confirmed roster of the dead, no photograph. By every standard of proof, the 1,982 incident is a legend. But it is a legend with a peculiar power, because it does not sit alone. Long before 1982 and long after, the indigenous peoples of the Baikal region told of spirits and beings that lived in the lake of a realm beneath the water that belonged to something other than us. And in the decades since, the encounters have continued, quietly, in the accounts of divers and fishermen and researchers who have no interest in fame and every interest in keeping their reputations intact. The 1,982 divers, if they existed, were not the first to see the pale figures in Baikal's depths, and they were very far from the last. They even have a name now, whispered among the people who study the strange side of this lake, the swimmers. Strip away the Cold War drama of the 1,982 story, and you are left with a single recurring claim that appears again and again across the history of Lake Baikal, from indigenous legend to modern sonar: that there are humanoid beings in the deep water. Not fish, not seals, upright, pale, human-shaped figures, far larger than a person, that move through the coldest and deepest parts of the lake as if they belong there, because they do. They are described with an unsettling consistency by people who could not have coordinated their stories. Tall, often estimated at 2 to 3 meters, pale or silver-skinned, smooth, almost luminous in the dark. Shaped like a person in the broad strokes, a head, a torso, limbs, but proportioned wrong, elongated, with movements that are too fluid, too fast, too at home in water that would kill any of us in minutes. They are seen at the edges of the light, and then they are gone. Divers describe the feeling of being watched from below long before they ever see anything, the specific animal certainty that something in the dark beneath them is aware and patient and unafraid. The mainstream position is that these are misidentifications, and there are candidates. Baikal's endemic seal, the Nerpa, is real, and in the gloom, a large seal rising suddenly toward a frightened diver could take on a monstrous shape. There are large fish. There are the tricks that cold, pressure, oxygen mixtures, and pure terror play on the human mind at depth, the same conditions that make deep divers hallucinate and lose their judgment. A single sighting is easy to dismiss. So is a dozen. That is the reasonable view, and it deserves to be heard. But the reasonable view has a problem, and the problem is the consistency. A frightened diver mistaking a seal does not explain why the description barely changes across centuries and across witnesses who never met. It does not explain the indigenous accounts that predate scuba by generations, describing tall, pale beings in the deep. It does not explain the 1,982 divers, if there is any truth in them at all, describing the same silver, upright, helmeted figures that a fisherman 200 years earlier would have called a spirit of the lake. And it does not explain what a research drone appears to have filmed just above the deepest floor of Baikal in 2021, in the minutes of footage that were quietly removed before anything could be released. Because that is where this story comes back to where it began. The pale shape rising into the drone's floodlights, the upright form that filled the frame, the head that turned toward the light, the feed cutting to static a mile down, in the cold and the dark, at the bottom of the oldest lake on Earth, in the exact water where Soviet divers reportedly died trying to bring one of these things to the surface. The expedition's lead scientist would not talk. The deepest footage never surfaced. And the people who were on that boat, the ones who saw the frames before they were gone, have said only that what came up out of the black that day was shaped like us, and was looking at us, and should not exist. That is what the drone found at the bottom of Lake Baikal. That is why the footage was buried. And that is the answer to the question this lake has been asking, in its rings and its flashes and its vanished dead and its silver swimmers, for far longer than we have been listening. So let's lay it out plainly. Everything we actually know, with the theories and the folklore set to one side. We know the lake is real and impossible. The deepest, oldest, largest lake on Earth. A mile-deep rift in Siberia, holding a fifth of the planet's fresh water. 80% of its life, found nowhere else. Its floor less mapped than the surface of Mars. We know the rings are real. Perfect dark circles carved into meter-thick ice by warm currents spinning in the dark below, patterns so vast we could not see them until we looked down from orbit. We know the dead are real, that Baikal drowns people every year and gives almost none of them back, that its floor of scavengers strips a body to bone in hours and keeps the rest. We know the flashes are real, lights rising from a bottom no sunlight has ever touched, some explained by gas and glowing life, some not explained at all. And we know that for over 40 years, the story of the 1,982 divers has refused to die, no matter how many times it has been denied. They tried to tell us. The indigenous peoples who spoke of beings in the deep water long before anyone could dive to meet them. The divers who came up shaking and said they had been watched. The 3 men who allegedly never came up at all. We called it superstition. We called it seals and nitrogen and Cold War rumor. We sailed our boats across the surface, and told ourselves that a lake is just a lake, even when this one kept drawing circles on its own ceiling and swallowing everyone who fell into it. But Baikal is not just a lake. It is a closed world, 25 million years old, evolving in the dark, keeping its dead and its secrets in water we can barely reach. The rings still appear every winter, the flashes still rise from the deep, the bodies still go down and stay down. And somewhere at the bottom of the oldest lake on Earth, in a mile of black and freezing water, the pale, upright silver shapes that Soviet divers swore they saw, that the military swore never existed, and that a drone finally caught in 2021 are still exactly where they have always been, watching the small, bright machines we send down and waiting for us to stop looking so they can go back to being alone. Baikal does not give up its secrets. It never has. And the next time you see a photograph of that beautiful frozen lake with its perfect dark rings, remember that the rings are drawn from below by something moving in the dark, on a scale we cannot match, in a place we were never meant to see. The bottom of Lake Baikal is not empty, and it never was.